Hello and welcome back to another episode of The Mark Moss Show, where we talk about the decentralized revolution each and every week, the way the world is changing, swinging from centralization to decentralization. We look at it through the lens of politics, finance, and technology, so we get this holistic view, and we can take things into context of what they are. If you watch any of my content, which I put out a lot of, I'm on YouTube. You can search me on YouTube. Just search Mark Moss. All these podcasts, you can watch them on YouTube. Just search Market Disruptors there. Obviously, the podcast, the radio show, all the guest appearances I do on a weekly basis, etc. And then you probably know, if you watch any of that, then you know I also love to use a lot of history. And I think history gives us this, history tells us what's going to happen. If I touch a burning hot stove and burn my hand, then history would tell me that if I touch a burning hot stove again, I probably burn my hand again. So if Einstein's definition of insanity is that doing the same thing but expecting a different result. If you do the same thing, you're going to get the same result. That's what we know. But yet, there's the other quote that says, those who don't know history are bound to repeat it. And so since people, I guess, don't know history, then I guess we just have to repeat it over and over. So it's better to learn from other people's history. Like, I'd rather learn that, well, you touched the hot stove and you burned your hand, so I don't want to do that, right? That'd be a much better way than me having to do that myself and figure it out. But yet we don't seem to get that, or maybe we do, and maybe it's being done intentionally. And I'm going to leave it up to you to figure that out. I'd love for you to hit me up on social media and tell me what you think. But I want to tell you what's going on. Big news in the United States. I mean, it's happening all over the world. It's happening in the United States. And then I'm going to go into a historical example. And I want to talk about what's going on specifically in California, specifically in San Francisco, Los Angeles as well. We're going to talk about San Francisco, though, today. And then we're going to talk about a historical example, and we'll understand that. San Francisco has been run into the ground for a long time by their district attorney, Gascon. And Gascon has now made his way to Los Angeles, and he's doing the same thing in Los Angeles that happened in San Francisco. Now, people can take a lot of abuse. I talk about this all the time. A lot of people are like, oh, as soon as this happens, the people are going to stand up and revolt. It's like, no, they're not. No, they're not. People can take a lot of abuse. But there's a few things they won't tolerate. One, the biggest thing, all throughout history, thousands of years of history, the one thing is that when they can't eat, when they can't afford to feed their families or themselves, then all bets are off. But the other thing is that people don't want to be around lawlessness. One of the things, not just one of the things, probably the most important thing that's made America great, and the reason why immigrants from all over the world come to America, is because America has a rule of law. Other nations don't have the same rule of law. And so someone could just come steal my land or take my business or shut me down or throw me in jail or whatever. But not the United States. We have a constitution. We have a rule of law. And that rule of law is set in stone, and it's known by everybody, and it protects me. The Constitution of the United States does not give us freedom. It limits what the government can do. And that rule of law allows me to build my life because I know what the rules are, and I know people can't just come change them. In a lawless environment, a lawless nation, nobody wants to live there because nobody can save, nobody can plan for the future, nobody knows what's going to happen. And so people leave lawless nations all the time, or where there's weak rules of law, and they come to the United States where there's a strong rule of law. But that rule of law is being taken down everywhere. Now, what does this have to do with the decentralized revolution, Mark? Well, this is one of the big catalysts that's driving this change. This is one of the big catalysts that's driving this change. I want to go into I'm going to jump into history. We're going to talk about this story real quick, a story that probably a lot of you don't know. And this is a story, we're going to go back in time to the 60s, not that far back. This is recent history. So at the time, we had, in the United States, the president was President Lyndon Johnson. And Lyndon Johnson had this idea. He wanted to create an experiment. And he wanted to create an experiment to produce the best urban planning. So he wanted to central planning always fails. He wanted to centralize urban planning. And what he decided to do was get a 9 square mile section of the city So we're talking about Detroit. So there's a story of Detroit. Most of you probably don't know. I don't know if I said that. This is a story of Detroit. So President Lyndon Johnson wanted to create this centralized urban planning, and so he decided that Detroit would be the model city that the rest of the nation would be modeled after. So we're going to make it work there, and then once we prove it there, we're going to take it to the rest of the country. Well, it is being taken to the rest of the country, but I don't think it ever worked. So let's dig into that. So they took a 9 square mile section of the city, had about 134,000 residents at the time, and they created what again, is the model city. So we're going to create this model city. We're going to export it to the rest of the country. They spent $400 million, which in 1960 was a lot of money. I didn't do the math, but it's probably, a few billion now. And they spent a lot of money to do this. Now, in 1961, Detroit had their very last Republican mayor. Now, I don't like labels. I don't like to talk about left or right or Republican or Democrat. I don't like to do that. But it's important, I think, for this story, to look at the facts. And this is the fact. So 1961 was the last Republican mayor. In came this new Democrat, Jerome Kavanaugh. And Jerome Kavanaugh, he had ran on Lyndon Johnson's task force. And he had a lot of support. And of course he had a lot of support because he was on the president's task force. So the entire political apparatus came behind him to push him up. So he had this massive support, and he was also massively corrupt. So anybody who is on the task force and has all the benefit, the support from the political apparatus, is also probably on the take. If you're not on the take, you're not going to make it very long in politics. And so he was so corrupt that he actually served 10 years in prison afterwards. So he found his day in court, and he found his time in prison on top of that. But what Kavanaugh did, Kavanaugh was a white mayor, and it's probably just relevant just because Detroit was mostly black at the time. And what he did is he went and he pandered to all the black voters. He said, "Hey, I'm here for you, and I want to bring you up out of poverty, and I really want to work for the black community." At the time, so he was just a big huckster, right? And at the time, he marched with MLK. Which was probably the right thing to do, regardless of what race you were at that time. But he was really, like I said, a huckster trying to pander to these people. He said he was going to be very, very aggressive on affirmative action, and he did. He put all types of policies in place in the city. Remember, the city was going to be centrally planned. So it's going to be, basically, think of it like a communist city, right? The government's going to control everything in this little model city area. So he put in all these super aggressive affirmative action things that gave a lot of benefits to the minorities. And of course, he expanded the role of the government. So again, the government was going to control everything. So we had to greatly expand the role of the government, the powers they had, and so forth. The thing is that this expanded role of the government and their job or their goal of creating this model city had to enforce things that maybe some people didn't want to do, right? So they had to tell people, they had to force this change. People didn't want to do it on their own. They maybe didn't even know what the plan was. So the government, like a communist country, had to tell people what to do. They had to force the change. So they had to tell people where they could live. They had to tell people what to build, what they could build, what they couldn't build. They had to tell people, what businesses that they were allowed to open or what businesses had to be closed. And then the people in exchange received cash, they received training, they received education, they received healthcare. So they forced everyone to do what to build, what business they could have, where to live, and then in exchange they gave them money, training, education, and healthcare. You don't want to miss out this story on the Detroit, and then we'll bring it back to current time. But you have to understand this historical reference. And so anyway, he came in and they expanded the role of the government. The government now told everybody what to do, where they could live, what they could build, what business to open, what business had to close. And they gave people money, they gave people training, they gave people education and healthcare, right? So like any socialist or communist country, we're going to give you everything you need, and you're going to do everything we say. That's how it works, right? That's what I tell my kids. Hey, since I give you the place to live and I give you all the food and I give you all the money, you got to do what I say. And that's basically what they did. The problem is that, well, besides the fact that socialism always fails, is because adults, most people don't really like being told what to do. So it kind of works for a minute, but even after a while, people are over it. My kids, they've gotten old enough, and they don't really like being told what to do anymore. Adults certainly don't want to be told what to do. They don't like being plundered by the government, right? They don't like losing their jobs because of just a government policy like this aggressive affirmative action he put into place. So people were losing their jobs because of race, for example. You're not a minority. You can't have that job. And so as a result of that, it always fails. These policies won't work. Like, we need people who do the best job, regardless of what race they are. We need people who have incentive, people that want to work on their own motivations. And so it always fails. But let's dig into what happened. So this has been going on for about 5 years. So now let's fast forward to 1966. So for about 5 years, they've been building up this tension because of these really aggressive affirmative action policies that have been put into place, by pandering to the minority group, the black people at the time, by giving them lots of money, firing the white people because of affirmative action, all these things. And then things had kind of been building. Here we are in 1966. By 1966, within 5 years, more than 22,000 middle and upper class residents have left. So there was about 130,000 at the time, 134,000. So 22,000 of the 134,000, a considerable chunk had left permanently, and within 5 years. Why? Because, like I said, people just don't like to be told what to do. They don't like that. The next year, in the model city, a party broke out. And it was at this bar, and it was in the black area of town, and it was a bar, and the police moved in to break it up, and it turned into be the worst race riot of the 60s. So for that decade, it was the worst race riots in the United States. It left more than 40 people dead and more than 5,000 people homeless. Stores all in the area in the model city were looted. They were burned to the ground, right? We see this happening still today, right? You see it all over. So 40 people died, 5,000 people were left homeless. Stores were looted. Stores were burned to the ground. It got so bad, but the mayor was afraid to move in with force because it was a race riot, and he was afraid of making it even worse. So finally, President Johnson had to do something. And so the president moved in, which we don't see this today, and he sent in 2 divisions of paratroopers into the model city in Detroit. Over the next 18 months, 140,000 upper and middle class, tax-paying, we'll say, residents left. So things are going downhill really quick. People don't like it. People are leaving. The upper and middle class people, the tax-paying people are leaving. Who's left? The poor people on the government payroll. That's who's left. So that would seem like a failure to me. And I would think, well, we tried it. Turns out telling people what to do, treating people differently, unfairly, and overtaxing people apparently doesn't work. And people don't like that. And everyone that was productive moved away. And now all we have left is a bunch of unproductive people we have to pay. So that failed. I guess let's try something different. No, but that's not what the government does. The government wants to double down. So well, it didn't work because we didn't try it hard enough. If we do twice as hard, maybe it'll work next time. And that's exactly what the government did. So in 1974, they expanded the program into something called the Community Development Block Grant Program. And so basically what that did is it creates groups and individuals who would receive more money from the government. Remember, because the tax-paying people left, so the government has to pay even more people. On top of that, they continued to try to expand it. Remember, Detroit was the automobile capital of the world. So then the big 3 automakers, Ford, Chrysler, and GM, gave about $500 million to the city for the program, and it still didn't work. Now, since then, every single mayor of Detroit, since 1961, has been a Democrat. Every single mayor of Detroit since 1974 has been black. And the city has been the major recipient of every single major social program since the 60s. They've received hundreds of billions of dollars in government grants, loans, and programs, but yet where is Detroit today? Detroit is one of the poorest, most violent cities in the United States, still today. I mean, just listen to Eminem, right? he can tell you about the Detroit streets. And what happened? Well, the centralized planning failed. People didn't want to be told what to do. People didn't want to lose their jobs. The people with money left. The upper and middle classes left, but the poor, they didn't have the option to leave. Some did as well. during that time, from the 60s to the 90s, over 30 years, the model city lost 63% of the population. 63% of the population left. That's how much they liked the model city. And they also lost 45% of the housing. That's how well it did. Now, I tell you that story because they were supposed to create the model city that was going to be so great, and then they were going to do it in the rest of the country. Well, they did do it in the rest of the country. The problem is it never worked back then, and it's certainly not working today. So jumping forward, let's talk back about San Francisco. So San Francisco is on the verge of an economic reckoning. Why? Well, same thing. San Francisco has been ground zero for progressives, progressive ideology, ground zero for socialist movements within the United States. They've all gone to San Francisco, Berkeley, et cetera. All right. Now, L.A. also used to be a shining city. Now, we talked about how the DA left San Francisco to come to L.A. That's a different story. But L.A. lost a lot of its glitz and glamour in the 70s. Why? Because crime rates started to skyrocket. That's the key piece, is crime rates. What happened in Detroit? Crime rates, right? It all started with the fight at the bar, which then led into the race war. People don't want to be around violence. I want to live somewhere I feel safe. If I don't feel safe, I am going to leave. Nobody wants to be terrorized by that. So when crime skyrocketed in LA, people left. San Francisco was able to hold on to its affluent image for longer, and it was once considered one of the greatest cities in the U.S. But you won't believe what's happened to San Francisco. I got the stats, the charts to back it up, and it's not good. It's probably going to end up just like Detroit. Over the last, 100 years, 200 years in the United States, we've had a lot of centralization. People have moved to the cities. It wasn't enough just to be in the United States. You couldn't be in other parts of the world. You had to come to the United States. But you couldn't just be in the United States. You had to be in the city. You had to be in New York or Chicago or Detroit or San Francisco. You had to be in a city. But now it's decentralized. Now people are moving all over the United States, which is why real estate in Colorado and Wyoming and Montana is blowing up. But not just there, also in Playa del Carmen, Mexico, or Florianopolis, Brazil. And so it's going to continue to decentralize. And we're talking about, part of the reason why we're talking about this mass exodus of the cities. If you missed the historical story of Detroit, go back and check out the podcast on that. But here we are talking about San Francisco. So San Francisco has been this place that progressives wanted to go to. People who were so progressive, they wanted to be so lax on all these things. But the problem is that people don't want to live where they're told what to do. People don't want to be taken advantage of. People don't want to be, they want to live around crime. People want to be safe. And that's a big thing. So back to San Francisco. It was once considered one of the greatest cities in the U.S., but the past decade in particular has not been so kind to the Bay Area. The free market mentality of the businesses used to keep the insanity of the San Francisco left ideologies in check. So because there was enough business going on, there was free markets, they were able to kind of counterbalance this heavy central control ideologies that were there, that were pervasive. But now the corporate world has joined the ideologies of the left, and they're engaging in activism right alongside everybody else. And that is the problem. So the city is now famous for its depravity and decline. And this is factual. Just look it up on YouTube. You can find all the videos. Just go onto your favorite app store on your phone, and you'll see there's multiple apps made to track poop. That's right, to track poop. Why? It helps residents avoid stepping in human fecal matter that's piled up on the sidewalks, as well as entire neighborhoods and street corners that are overrun with homeless people and fentanyl addicts. They say that San Francisco is the only city where a dog would accidentally step in human feces. That's how bad it is. Then they have multiple apps to back it up. Look, this isn't me. This is what it is, all right? Much like L.A. and the city of Portland, wherever the political left takes full control, these are the kinds of unfortunate scenes you're likely to witness on a regular basis in San Francisco. Recent estimates project at least 20,000 homeless people reside in the city this year. It says that the social implosion, along with the draconian COVID mandates, caused hundreds of thousands of people to flee the state. Again, the social implosion. People don't want to be around this. You don't want to walk out of your house and see fecal matter all over and homeless people everywhere and trash everywhere. Thanks to Gascon, the district attorney in San Francisco at the time, now he's in LA, he decriminalized theft under $1,000. He decriminalized drug use. He decriminalized resisting arrest. So what do you think is going to happen? Well, they steal and they resist arrest. In San Francisco, you can find countless videos of this. They show up and they just go into like the CVS and just steal everything because there's no crime. But what happens? The store can't stay in business. Now all the stores had to shut down. The restaurants couldn't stay open because people go in there, order all this food, and then get up and just leave and say, what are you going to do? Call the police? It's not even illegal. So the business is shut down. People will not put up with that. They won't deal with the draconian COVID mandates. Why would they live unfree when they can go live free somewhere else? Thousands of people left the state. San Francisco saw a 6.8% population decline just last year. Sales tax revenues dropped by 50%. 50% of their sales tax has dropped. Where are they going to get the money to stay in business? Where are they going to get the money to pay for all these people? Just like the story of Detroit. The most visible signals of collapse are in the real estate market for now. Residential homes have cratered by about 30%, but the real damage is in the commercial real estate space. Bids for office space in downtown San Francisco are down 60 to 70%. Let's break that down a little bit. So in the commercial real estate space, it's really bad. It's so bad, as a matter of fact, that the entire downtown core that used to be San Francisco's GDP, 70% of San Francisco's sales tax revenue came from the downtown, and 40% of the jobs. The problem is all the businesses have left. Big tech employers, Yelp, Airbnb, they're gone. All the companies, they've left. Even Meta left. They're all leaving. This led to massive office vacancies. A recent report from the Urban Displacement Program Project ranked the city's downtown recovery as dead last among more than 60 cities across North America. Dead last. And so now there's these zombie buildings all over downtown San Francisco. The risk of San Francisco's real estate collapse is here. It says that per Dan McNamara, a New York hedge fund group who buys up real estate that's under duress, he doesn't even want San Francisco real estate. He said, we've had all these tech companies that have been driving office space usage for the past 20 years, but we believe that's changed forever. Building owners are asking the city to please cut their tax bills on the grounds that their buildings don't have any people paying and they've lost all their value. Hey, we can't afford it. Can you lower our property taxes? But because of Prop 13 in California, San Francisco has protection from the property taxes going down. So this old law limits when properties can be reassessed for tax purposes. So even though the property values have dropped by 60 or 70% and they have no tenants paying, the building owners still have to pay the same old rates from when those buildings were worth full values. Older buildings, even ones worth tens of millions at market prices, have to pay taxes based on the old valuations, but they can't afford it. So what's going to happen? You have all these buildings, they have no one renting. They're not coming back. They're being assessed taxes on this old valuation, even though the valuations are down 60 or 70%. The city has put these policies in place. They've driven everyone away. People with money have left. Businesses have left. Now they have no income. How do they pay for all the homeless people? And now all these building owners are going to lose their buildings because they can't afford to keep up with the property taxes that can't come down because of laws put in place. See how that works? Now, let's see here. 2/3 of respondents say the city has gone downhill since they first moved there. 70% of the people polled there said it's unlikely the conditions will improve over the next 3 years. 70%, it won't improve. 40% of San Franciscans say they will move out of the city within that time. 40% are going to leave. Those most likely to leave the city are between the ages of 18 and 34. 54% saying they are preparing now to leave the city. Between April of 2020 and July of 2021, 20% of residents in their 20s left the city. And homelessness was ranked as the top problem, with respondents with public safety placing second. Remember, people won't live somewhere where it's not safe. People don't want that. The numbers show it. 40% of the people say they will move out of this. They're preparing to move out of the city. I don't know how much more we can say that. Now, this is not unique to San Francisco. As I said, the district attorney that created this problem in San Francisco is now in Los Angeles. He's doing the same thing. We saw this week that they're doing now the same thing in Illinois with this new, what do they call it? Safe T Act is what they're calling it, a Safe T Act, eliminating cash bail. The Illinois mayor sounded the alarm on how dangerous a state law that eliminates cash bail will be, arguing communities will be left with more vulnerable victims of crimes, and the victims will lose their constitutional rights. More crime. Why? Because we're not going to punish it. If you take away the punishments, you're going to get more crime. And we were talking about this new bill they put into place and said, I can't, Orland Park Mayor Keith Pecou said, at a town hall meeting, quote, I can't even begin to tell you how dangerous this act is, end quote. The Safety Act will restrict who can be arrested, increase eligibility for probation for people convicted with some drug crimes, among other changes to policing and police training. Supporters of the law says it will make it more fair. It's more fair if we don't punish people for their crimes, I suppose. But Keith Pecou says that by abolishing the cash bail, it creates a massive threat to residents. So it eliminates the need for, or here it says, a press release from Orland Park Villages states the abolishing cash bail will affect almost every offense, including kidnapping, armed robbery, secondary murder, drug-induced homicide, aggravated DUI, threatening a public official, aggravating fleeing of eluding. The town leadership also argued that victims of crimes will be denied their, quote, constitutional rights. It denounced how offenders released on electronic monitoring devices will need to be in violation of their parole for 48 hours before police can act. And police will no longer be able to remove trespassers from a residence or a business. So if police aren't able to remove a trespasser from a business or a house, so what do you do then? So I have a house, I have a family, I got little girls at my house. If a trespasser came to my house, I'd probably want to call the police. But now the police are no longer able to remove a trespasser from my house. If that started happening in my neighborhood and I started hearing about this happening, you would be sure that I'm going to move away from there as fast as possible. I would never put my family in jeopardy of something like that. Who would? Remember, people need to feel safe. If we can't feel safe, we are not going to live there. It says the legislation of nearly 800 pages was drafted poorly and passed in the middle of the night with little to no public debate or review, and contained various reactionary requirements inconsistent with longstanding and sound jurisprudence. Now look, this doesn't take a genius to figure this out, right? This doesn't take a genius to figure it out. We have the historical precedents. We see what happens when you centrally plan economies. We've seen it happen in countless places all around the world for the last 100 years. We've seen it happen in Russia through the Bolshevik Revolution. We've seen it happen in Germany. We've seen it happen in China through the Mao's A Great Leap Forward. We've seen it happen in smaller nations all over the place. We've seen it happen in the United States when the President of the United States, Lyndon Johnson, created what he called the model city and tried to do their best with massive amounts of stimulus and telling people what to do, and they couldn't do it. And the reason why is because the human drive for freedom, the human drive for ingenuity, the human drive that we have innate into us, and our own incentives and motivations that drive us and propel us to be great. When you tell people what to do, when you take away those incentive structures, then you get the opposite. And again, at the end of the day, if I can't feel safe, if I can't grow, if I can't strive to be better, to get more prosperity for myself and my family, and more importantly, if I can't feed myself and my family, then I'm going to leave. And even more importantly, if I'm not safe, if there's no rule of law there, then I'm going to leave, which is why people left the model city, which is why businesses have fled out of San Francisco, which is why 40% of the respondents of this poll in San Francisco said they are planning to leave the city within the next 3 years. It's the same reason why they're going to be fleeing out of Illinois. Same reason why I would leave. Now, this situation in California is a little close for comfort. And I can certainly tell you that if I am in a situation where I feel unsafe, I will leave. Now, when we have so much historical precedent, when we can see how it worked in the model city, when we can see how it worked out in San Francisco, and when common sense just tells us how this works out. Look, come on. If you remove the crime and you make it legal for people to steal less than $1,000, and you make it legal to resist arrest, and you make it legal to do drugs on the street, what do you think is going to happen? People are going to steal. People are going to resist arrest. People are going to do drugs on the street. That's what's going to happen. It doesn't take a genius. You don't even need to look through history to see this. Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's partner, says, show me the incentives, I'll show you the outcome. If I can go into any restaurant I want, order $900 worth of food and leave, and that's not a crime, and I can go into Best Buy or CVS and get $900 worth of goods and leave, and that's not a crime, then people are going to do it, and they certainly are. In Los Angeles, they're having these things. They used to be they're still flash mobs, but the flash mobs used to be where people would coordinate on social media, and randomly they'd show up in a town square or something, and they'd all bust out into a dance or something like that, and you'd see them all across social media. It was kind of funny and kind of cute and entertaining, whatever. Today, what they're doing in Los Angeles is they're still doing flash mobs, but what they do now is they coordinate somehow on social media, and they all show up at a store at the same time. And instead of doing a cute song and dance routine, now they loot. Yeah, it's pretty good. Not only do they loot, they commit acts of violence to anybody who's caught in their way. Now, let's say that my daughter wanted to go out and get some ice cream, so we leave at 9 o'clock at night. We run down to the 7-Eleven where they've been doing these types of things, and we run in there to buy ice cream. And next thing you know, 50 people show up to start looting and tearing the store down, and I'm caught in the crossfire of that. I'm certainly not going to want that. I'm certainly not going to want my daughter to be in that situation. I'm not going to want to be in that situation. I'm not going to want my daughter in that situation. And I would never, ever put my family in that type of a situation. So if those types of things are happening around me and the police are doing nothing about it to stop him, then I'm going to leave as everybody else is. So I'll ask you the question. It seems so obvious. We have historical precedents for it. We know the incentives equal the outcomes. Is this being done on purpose? Or is it being done out of ignorance? You can tell me. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love it if you hit me up on social media. You can find me on any of the social media platforms at @1markmoss, or you can go to my website at onemarkmoss.com, and you'll find all my stuff linked there. Hit me up on social media. Let me know. Are they doing it out of ignorance? Are they doing it on purpose? And if they're doing it on purpose, what is the purpose? What's the purpose? Now, I'm talking about the way the world is moving from centralization to decentralization. This is one of the many catalysts for this. I believe this trend will only continue to play out. Of course, it's also being led by technology. It's not just that people are leaving the cities because they're unsafe. It's also because now I can do my job from anywhere. And if I can do my job from anywhere, why would I live in the city when I can just go live in the woods out in the mountains somewhere beautiful? And of course I would. So technology is always the driver of this as well. But these laws that are being put into place by a dying, centralized nation state are only going to lead to this catalyst even further. Anyway, you're listening to The Mark Moss Show, talking about the decentralized revolution, talking about how it's evolving, how it's developing, play by play. That's what I got for today. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Like I said, hit me up on social media at @1markmoss. Let me know. I'd love to hear from you, and that's what I got for today. Thanks for listening. Since you've stayed to the end, I know you like this video, which means you're probably going to really like this video right here and this video right here.